Modern Day CIO. So welcome everyone to South Florida HIMSS second professional development and student committee webinar. We created this three-series webinars on professional development as a part of the Mentor Mentee program that is a new addition to South Florida HIMSS chapter. It's a 12-week Mentor Mentee program with 10 Mentor Mentee pairs, and we're about halfway through the program. We'll conclude the Mentor Mentee program at the end of August. So we're opening up these webinars to our membership population. Thank you for joining us today. If you're not a member, I encourage you to become a member. My name is Kendall Brown. I'm the president of the chapter for another year. I invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you're not familiar with HIMSS, HIMSS is an acronym for Health Information Management System Society. It's a global organization. Our particular chapter has nearly 2,000 members. It's actually a personal goal and a chapter goal to reach 2,000. So I encourage you to become a member. It's a nominal fee. And you'll learn about things like this webinar and be included in other programs that the chapter puts on throughout the year. The vision and mission of HIMSS. And HIMSS 2023 is located in Chicago this year, April 17th through the 23rd. We hope to see you there. Central North Florida's chapter and South Florida's chapter typically get together and host a Florida chapter reception or a party. It's quite, I think some of you all have been there. I'm sure we'll do the same at HIMSS National in Chicago in April, but I want to make sure you put those dates on your calendar. If you're not connected with us, I invite you to connect with us on social media. LinkedIn seems to be my preference, but we have Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all of the major platforms. Just a couple of announcements about things that we have coming up. Our annual Innovation Award, and don't let the term innovation intimidate you. We were just talking this morning amongst the board, maybe best practices or something like that. But this is the 5th year that the chapter is doing an award. You can submit your application online, and I appreciate if someone could put the URL in the chat. The deadline to submit is August 10th. There are some hefty prizes associated to the winner of the Innovation Award. One, you get exposure through our chapter, and 2, the winner will be announced at our annual conference, Integrate. Spoiler alert, November 17th is Integrate. I invite you to put the date on your calendar, and we're hosting at a new location, Nova Southeastern University's Innovation Center. It's pretty innovative, robots, electronic walls, hybrid capabilities. And the Innovation Award prize, the chapter will host you and cover your registration fee to HIMSS National in Chicago. So and you get a nice big trophy. So I encourage you to check out the Innovation Award. And the chapter is always looking for volunteers. There's many ways to be a volunteer. I invite you to reach out to any of the board members or myself if you're looking to get involved. Speaking of Integrate, we meet every Friday. We met this morning planning for our annual conference, Integrate. That's a great way to get involved. And it takes an army to host a 300-person annual conference. So if you're interested in being involved, please get in touch. Thank you to all of our sponsors. Listed here on the slide. Without them, we couldn't do things like what we are doing today. And the next and final of the 3 series and our career professional development webinar series is August 15th. Our very own board member, Grant McGraw, will be speaking on personal brand, August 15th, 12:30, same time, same place, a month from now. And I've heard him speak on the topic, and he's very insightful and has some great tips and tricks. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce my near and dear good friend, Sarah Richardson, SVP and Chief Digital and Information Officer from Tivity Health. Sarah used to be a South Florida resident. We lost her 2 years ago, but we're still very good friends with her. She's a wealth of knowledge, a great mentor, fellow board member of Chime, and I'm excited to hear her words of wisdom today. So Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Excellent, Kendall. Thank you. I will also start to share my screen. I'm going to move the human pictures over here and make sure we get this right.
And we're recording this session, by the way.
Excellent. So you can see my screen in its totality.
Yes.
Still being a technologist, and sometimes the technology is part of the challenge. So thank you for having me today. I will put an early plug for Grant's session in August. Grant's also a good friend of mine, and he has so much fantastic information about branding, which is super important. Things like what we call ourselves and the way that we show up for different events such as this. I've known Kendall for 8 years now. We met in South Florida, as she mentioned, and we've been partnering for these types of presentations and HIMSS events and CHIME events for years together. So it's always an honor. Thank you, Kendall. And thank you to this chapter. So I'm gonna talk quickly, only because we have about 25 minutes, but about today's CIO and what that really means and forecasting the future. And you'll also notice I didn't put CDIO. I am a Chief Digital Information Officer. That's one of the things to think about. And we'll cover what the CXO to a degree means and how you establish your title to meet the strategic intent of what you're doing, both in your career from a branding perspective and forward thinking, but also for your organization. I'm going to cover 3 key topics today: how you build systems, how you build teams, and why diversity matters in a modern day world. So building systems is really, really key because we think about all the integration that is around us. And when we went to Vive back in March in Miami, and I went straight from that, I went to IPMI, we do HIMSS events, CHIME events. Already this year, those are some of the things that have happened. They're the premier space to explore transformative ideas in a setting designed to inspire you and inspire others. When you think about innovators and business leaders who are transforming healthcare and technology, that's where they are. And what was most notable in all of these sessions so far this year was truly the proliferation of solutions serving telehealth, AI, medical chatbots, the cloud, and mobile solutions. You think about the modernization even in your own systems, cloud native, mobile first, consumer-based technologies. We talk about them, and what does that mean for us? Because now more than ever, digitization completely erases the global boundaries we've had in the past. And in building systems with these capabilities, it creates automation, it leads to innovation, it equals what you need to do for operations. All of those things deliver value. And in all that value, the thing we don't always talk about that's so important, delivers revenue. Without money, there is no mission. And we have to make sure that we deliver the maximum value opportunities with the maximum revenue opportunities. CIOs and CDIOs, et cetera, that consider themselves revenue producing departments are the ones that tend to lean forward and be more successful. So having control over your time and making those things happen, by the way, is one of the most valuable currencies in the world. And I want you to remember that, because when you think about what it takes to be modern and to move your organizations forward in a highly competitive global environment, you absolutely can't do it by yourself. You may remember Sisyphus from Greek mythology. He was a king who was punished for self-aggrandizing craftiness and deceitfulness, and he was forced to roll an immense boulder uphill only for it to roll down when he nears the top, repeating this action into eternity. We don't have to be Sisyphus. Through classical influence on modern culture, we know that tasks can be laborious and futile at times, but we can get around them with the things that are important, like relationship building. So your world does not have to be Sisyphean if you create the right networks for yourself. These are some of the key relationships that are so important. Take a peek at these. It's not exhaustive. You could add hundreds of circles to this. When I think about the things where I focus my time, which is one of my currencies, these are the things I look at most. At times, some of these routes stretch further than others. But when you have a personal contact group who provides support, feedback, insight, researches information for you as a resource for ideas, it is literally simultaneously one of the most self-evident and necessary skills as a leader. There are people on this call that I'm on text chats with, and you may have heard me joking, we send gifts, back and forth, because sometimes you need that reminder that for as hard as the work that we do is every day, it's also meant to be fun. We're here because it gives us a sense of purpose and belonging, and that is really, really key. As the leader, we set that intention. And when we do that, we build trust. And why does trust matter, especially in business? Well, you think about trust from perspective of it's useful for spirit and inspiration. People want to work for somebody that they trust, but it also creates cooperation, and it's a coordinated effect for the organization. It produces speed, improved effectiveness, and it diminishes cost. Trust engages us in a moral dynamic that also expands allegiance in the organization and to remain with an organization for a longer period of time. Too often, people go to an organization for about 18 months and then they leave, or they're there, 2 or 3 years. There's no specific timetable for how long you should be in an organization. Yet, to really truly create lasting change, it is more than an 18-month window. And it's something to think about. The faster and more succinctly that you can build trust with people, the higher your capacity will be, and also your speed of delivery. When you're trustworthy, you also build credibility. And that matters because it legitimizes you and the business to the organization. It creates visibility for new customers and new partnerships and new revenue streams. And you get to be a bigger, better competitor. You go from defense to offense, where people are talking about, hey, we need to pay attention to what such and such health system is doing versus how we're going to pay attention to them. If you are in meetings and you're talking about what the competition is doing all the time, you need to start to shift and change that dynamic because they should be talking about you. When you're credible, you will broaden your audience reach and people will trust what you have to say. So I was fortunate to be able to work with a research agency recently. And I said, hey, what are you finding that are the top 2022 priorities for CIOs, CTOs, CISOs, et cetera? The to-do list gets bigger every single year, and digitization is pressing us on. And these were the rankings that came out. 800 CIOs from CIO.com ranked these priorities. So it was a little surprising how low the network ranged for employee engagement. Quite honestly, only 25% of respondents considered it to be a key priority, which I found kind of interesting because when you think about how much the world and the workforce has changed for us today, conversations state that teams already feel that they have a lot of adequate solutions in place to be able to do well, but it's more than that. It's the fact that if you work in a fully remote environment or a hybrid or fully back to the office, these become conversations that we never had before. And so the engagement component is as much the ability to understand that people working with their most productive is part of that conversation and can be a tough driver occasionally when you start to think about how you want to engage individuals such that security and privacy and the experience are top of mind. When you have constant turnover, you have disengaged individuals in your organization, you're not going to be super successful at the big deliverables that are always most important. Never lose sight, though, that when you think about it, you've got to start with the customer experience and work back to the technology. People often hear me say that technology is already there to an extent. We've got to put it into the best parameters that we can. This is important. Again, we stay ahead of our competitors, we improve our brand loyalty, and we increase positive feedback from those that we're serving. So if you think about customer experience management in this terms of helping improve customer interactions with your business, it provides us opportunities to analyze how it can be improved. Because a single negative customer interaction can have vast financial cost and damage your brand reputation, especially if the customer story is spread through social media or the news. I can't see all your faces right now. I would endeavor to say, when was the last time you posted about an awesome experience versus one that just drove you crazy and you're on the airplane and you're super annoyed because your flights have been canceled or delayed, your luggage, all the reasons why you would say, I'm, right from there in the moment, you're in the chair and you're saying that. But think about that. What if you flipped it and every time something was awesome, there was a chance to say something about it? Because there's a whole theory on pessimism. It's easier because the story pieces are fresher and more recent. That's what drives that initial reaction for something that's considered a bad experience. Optimism and that narrative requires looking at long stretches of history and developments, which people tend to forget and take more effort to piece together. So the accumulation of good takes longer than one bad. That can apply to all aspects of our lives. Most of us are patients in our own healthcare systems. Or if we're not working in a healthcare system or using our own products, are we supplying companies that are? Think about that experience and give that feedback, especially as a health IT professional. Give that feedback to the people who need to hear it in a way that is super constructive. Because if it wasn't for us giving that feedback, how would we know how to get better with the products and services we provide already? So you hear me talk about the CXO of the future. Are you an entrepreneur? Are you visionary? Are you an innovator? You heard Kendall say it in the very beginning. Innovation is one of those words that always freaks people out. And I'm like, think about it like this. You're not creating something net new. You are thinking of a better and new way of doing something. You might also be creating net new, but most of the time we're making things better. That's innovation. Visionary is simply setting the pace for where we're headed. An entrepreneur, all the little things you've got going on in your organization that allow your organization to accelerate. But you probably do that in your home life too. Literally, if you use eBay or Poshmark or anything else or Nextdoor where you're like reselling, you're really thinking about different things, that's an entrepreneurial spirit. Use it at work too. You'd be amazed at the ideas and the things that you can come up with. Because a true CXO of the future, and you think about recent years, digitization and digital transformation have become key topics that every business thinks about. And to a degree, I get a little vexed sometimes when I'm like, oh, digital transformation. I've been in IT for 28 years. Last time I checked, it's always been digital. We had analog moments. We had green screens here and there. Heck, there were punch cards in one of the data centers I worked in at one point. But think about this. It was still a digitization of the things that we were doing. So with technology, and in particular IT, becoming an inherent core component of the business is key. It can no longer be treated as a support function that gets relegated to back offices and has evolved into a key strategic component of the business. And with some of the traditional ways of managing and positioning IT and security within our companies, we have to address it more effectively. What worked well in the past may not work today. So going forward, IT has to focus less and less on cost and more about value add to the business. And with all that transformation and skill set, we have to get there too. So think about as a leader in technology, we have to evolve from running the organization to helping the business achieve a competitive advantage. Think about that piece. We are responsible and have the accountability for helping the business achieve a competitive advantage. It always takes technology to do it. Now, we still have to have technical depth, and with increasing emphasis on business knowledge and evangelism helps us drive that corporate growth. So think about this as well. There's a huge opportunity for IT to directly improve revenue by getting more involved with customer-facing products and services. There's a gap though. Recent research also shows that of 475 IT leaders surveyed in 2021, 48% of them consider their teams low maturity, partially due to limited budgets, but also due to limited skill sets. This is a backslide, by the way, from where people thought they were in 2020. Most people predicted the post-pandemic company leadership might try and revert to business as usual and erase the rapid progress that was made. Ultimately, whether businesses can adapt to the changing circumstance of tomorrow does come down to how well the IT leaders themselves are respected in their organizations. So if you think about your organizational maturity for your technology, where is it? I will share very openly, my team operates an older environment that has a dedicated and strategic plan aligned to our business to be completely modernized in 3 years. And we're doing like milestone phase gate check-ins to be able to say, here's what we've delivered to modernize from here. I inherited a shop that needed significant uplift, but we know it, we're investing in it, and we're doing it. And it's aligned to the levers that allow us to become a bigger, better organization. If you have any Johnny Cash fans out there, but once upon a time, he wrote an awesome song called One Piece at a Time. And the protagonist, if you don't know the song, basically works in a Cadillac factory for about 22 years. And every year, since he can't afford a Cadillac, he just takes a piece home with him. Well, once he retires, he gets all of his buddies together with some beers in the garage and puts the whole car together. So having stolen his dream car over a course of several years, when he finally retires, he realizes that they don't all fit together. They have to drill holes, make bolts, use adapter kits to get it working. And when he's done, he has a car with 2 headlights on the left and 1 on the right and 1 tail fin and a hood that doesn't quite fit. So if you work in IT, how familiar does this sound to you? Well, it's not that dissimilar from what most of us deal with. And often we have to piece things together to create incremental improvements from maybe 20 years ago to make it work. But essentially, in some cases, we're doing very little differently than how we did it before. But think about this. Tesla. Why'd I put Tesla up here? Well, they managed to take a 120-year-old industry and completely disrupt it within about 19 years. And to think that they were able to do that quickly is truly about consumer expectations of a product. And it should be a wake-up call to any industry who's unwilling to embrace drastic innovation. 120-year-old industry completely disrupted and reshaped in 19 years, which is why I love this guy. This is Eliud Kipchoge, if anyone runs or is familiar with him. He's won 2 gold medals, among other accolades in his career. But in 2019, he ran a marathon in less than 2 hours, which I don't care who runs, how far you run, that is super fast. And it didn't count because he ran it on a specially designed track with special shoes with like 43 pace setters, people that help him run faster because they're fresh on every mile. At the end of the day, the innovation behind all of that means that somebody will actually do it in less than 2 hours without the special accommodations, because once it's been done, it's proof that it can be done. And he's smiling like that after a marathon. I just did a half marathon like 2.5 weeks ago. That was not the look on my face, and it took me 3 hours. But regardless, the fact is, once you've done it, you know it can be done. That's why teams and diversity are so, so important. I put them together because we know that teams perform better than individuals. And the new studies tell us that diverse teams are better than ever. Age, race, religion, etc. You may or may not agree, but if we want to break down silos and separations at work, we have to do these kinds of studies and this purposeful team building within our own organizations. The workplace is so rich with diversity of backgrounds, ages, races, ethnicities, genders, orientations, style of thought, and that whole space of how we aspire to bring these teams together. The leaders who are best at harnessing the value of diversity are the ones willing to say, you and I are different. That's important. Let's talk about it and let's figure out how our perspectives complement each other and what that means about how we're going to get our work done. Instead of minimizing differences, embrace them and realize, how are you dealing with generational differentiation? What are some of the challenges? How do you address it? How do you get a space where you can talk about it and bring people together? This is my team. Actually, a little bit bigger since I built this deck. This is a deck I built a couple months ago and updated for this. But check it out. I have people from 18 countries. I think now we have 15 languages spoken. One of my favorite team meetings is the business intelligence team because there are 7 countries and about 10 languages, give or take, when they switch dialects on one team. And they're all remote. So think of the energy appropriately that has to get placed to listen to what each other has to say. Because you have to be able to hear what's being said behind the accent and behind the intent and behind the culture. This team is my most productive and successful group that I have in some cases because they have to hear each other and figure out solutions together because they all think a little bit differently and it's harder to understand one another. But boy, is it such a rich conversation and such a beautiful place to be paying attention to in the organization. Be proud of your numbers. Be aware of them. And think about the fact that, heck, when I got to my organization, everyone says, how do you get promoted? And I was like, what do you mean? How do you get promoted? Like there was no plan necessarily in place. So we put one in place. We've promoted 22% of our core team, grown our team substantially, and 11 of the promotions are from other countries. It is so fun to be in my team meetings, and I love the perspectives. And we get to celebrate like 20 different holidays because we have so many colleagues on our team from around the world. So we get to celebrate things like Diwali and other events that maybe other organizations don't. And that, by the way, as my opinion, is the most delicious holiday because all the food that everybody brings in. So the impact of diversity is really, really important. Higher quality, faster growing with more agility, and you're more likely to experiment and embrace failure in pursuit of new ideas. So resilience is going to be really, really key because the last 2 years or plus now have been monumental in terms of the impact current events have had on modern business. Global CIOs have been driving towards innovation and next-gen adoption at never before seen rates. And as COVID continues to linger, still to this day, questions around work models are more important than ever. Depending on how your team returned to work, these are some of the things that came up. Think of it like this. Many companies are still in the process of evaluating or reevaluating what they want their permanent return to work options to look like. And some are saying they're not really permanent. They are in themselves hybrid until the right balance is determined. But whether or not current conditions impact pre-existing plans in the short run, the key issues around maintaining a remote, hybrid, and on-site workforce have to be addressed. Even before the pandemic, I worked for a global company. We spent most of our time in hybrid type of environments. It worked for us. But think about this too. You have to have the tools to be able to do it. Collaboration tools are extremely necessary and beneficial for the future of the workforce. But unfortunately, there's too many of them, and that can pose a challenge for companies who don't stay on top of it or don't pay attention to what's being utilized. Having 10 or 15 different collaboration tools doesn't work. I think about it like this, whether you have governance, prioritization, etc. Pick 2 or 3 things that really, really work well for the absolute ability for teams to communicate. You can have all the tools that help them be productive. That is different than being communicative and connected to your teams. to try a few out, figure out which ones. You likely have to be the one to drive. I daily post an industry article on my team's industry channel in Teams. Why? Because if I don't, it won't get done. And sometimes people actually post other things. And while I think people aren't reading it because I'm not getting the likes here and there, often the teams will tell me, thank you for posting the content that you do. I loved seeing what you had to say. Remote teamwork. With more teams working remotely or under hybrid models and business leaders expecting greater access to IT, there are gaps that remain. Sometimes it's harder to innovate remotely. Sometimes you have to get people in a room together. Virtual working arrangements without thoughtful interaction can cause cohesion issues to erode over time, no doubt, despite being effective in the short term. I still have a group of programmers that when they want to solve a complex problem or build a new product to the next level, they want to get together. Sometimes they come to an office that we previously had established because we are 100% remote, or they meet in a city that's conducive to enough of them being in that general area. And I'm like, hey, pick a city that's affordable, buy some pizza, work through it and figure it out. Some of them were recently in Seattle for that very reason. And every so often you have to get together. But there are permanent decisions being made in some cases around the future of their workforce. It's crucial to pay close attention to how the policy choices you have enacted may impact a fragile balance. And so I asked the network or my network, where are the weaknesses in their teams today? And they shared with me, again, retention, sometimes the innovation spaces, but for the most part too, people said things are great. Check in with your teams early and often to make sure that they have what they need to be successful. They have a good boss, they have the tools they need to do their job, and they have an environment that allows them to grow. Those will be things that make people leave your organization. So here's some key takeaways from our conversation today. The role of IT is so much bigger than it's ever been before. Our systems, our teams, our diversity all need to be able to mesh together. If people are remote and hybrid and they expect a more radical workforce shift, we still have to make sure that the team's needs are being met. There's going to be, at least for me, I'm having a hard time hiring, retaining certain roles and teams because the competition is fierce. Not because I don't believe we create a great environment. Competition is fierce. I don't have a big company name. I have friends on this call who get to post a beautiful picture of the sunset and say, come work for me in Florida. And I'm like, you can stay at home if you work on my team. I don't have a view to share, but it can be difficult to do the things you want to be able to do if you don't have the environment that allows them to do it. And all of those environments are right for the right person at the right time. And maybe your budget's going to get bigger and you can spend more on the things that are more important. But to be able to do that, you have to have that trust and credibility to get the budget you need to be able to move the business forward, for people to trust you with a bigger number, to be credible, to deliver solutions that actually work. So in all the things we've talked about today, take a true evaluation, not the one that you think you're supposed to produce or the one that someone else wants to hear from you. Take time over this weekend to think about what this really means for you and your team with all the different inputs and ideas, and share and collaborate with your peers, those that are in HIMSS, etc. That gives you a chance to truly make your mark. I'll leave you with this idea. Everything that happens in an organization happens in or because of a conversation. If you want to change the culture, you've got to change the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I can hear the round of applause from everyone. That was so uplifting and motivational. Go post something good, be diverse. Leaders can't do it alone. Communicate, listen, and check in with your team. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Thank you, Sarah. Happy birthday to you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Forward to connecting on our next South Florida HIMSS event. Thank you all for your time today and have a nice weekend.
Thanks, all. Take care. Bye.